Hello and welcome to the EDS Empower Hour. My name's Christy Cox and thank you for being here, whether you're live with us today and our special guest, or if you're watching the webinar later. Today, I'm so excited to have with us as a guest, Jill Brook, who is a clinical researcher, nutritionist, and research director at the nonprofit she started, Stand Up to Pots. She's also the mastermind behind the Standing Up to Pots podcast. And she's not only led some groundbreaking studies on dysautonomia, and she's going to tell us a little bit about her own personal lived experience that she's dealt with. And what she just shared with me was her 17-year search for a diagnosis. We all kind of know that one too well, right? She brings a powerful mix of science, empathy, and real world experience. We're so thrilled to have her share some tips and give us a presentation on what she's up to. And when I talked to her, I asked her if she could talk to us about some of the things that you can help do to manage like heat intolerance or diet and some of the things with dysautonomia that can help make this life a little bit easier to live. And I got a real kick out of her when she told me how she managed the heat was moving to Alaska, literally. So thank you so much, Jill, for being our guest and being with us today. I'll hand it over to you to let you tell a little bit about your story, and feel free to start your slides whenever you're ready.
Okay, well, thank you, and thank you for that kind introduction. I should just say that I did not found the nonprofit Standing Up to Pots, but I am proud to be their research liaison, and some other fabulous people founded it, so I don't want to take their
Thank you for
credit.
the correction.
But yeah, so see, I will share my screen, and is that looking right to you?
Hold on one second. There we go. I got it.
Okay. Yeah, so we're going to talk about practical nutrition tips for dysautonomia because, at least from what I hear about, dysautonomia is one of the things that does get a lot worse when it gets hot out. Um, and so that'll be our topic, and I'll try to be real practical. And I should say that this is a version of a talk that I gave for the Dysautonomia Project recently. It's a little bit shorter because it seems like some of the best stuff happens afterwards in the discussion. So I'll make sure we have time for that. So, yes. I want to make sure that we give the caveat that everybody should consult their doctor about what's right for them. And this is not medical or dietary advice. I know you know that. But especially because dysautonomia is still in its infancy as far as knowledge about nutrition. And we really only have a few studies. They're done pretty much only on POTS patients. And so, I know nutrition doesn't have the best track record of getting things right the first time. And if you were conflicted about whether to eat eggs for breakfast this morning, then you're still living that. So we just like to we just like to make sure that none of this is set in stone quite yet. And then my last disclaimer is that the cartoons in this presentation were made by me and my husband when we were struggling with my severe dysautonomia. So they try to be funny with the emphasis on try. And a little bit more about me. Yeah, so I was a nutrition researcher and then a nutritionist for 27 years. I was nutrition consultant to the dysautonomia clinic for several years. That's me doing acro yoga because I look for ways to avoid being upright even when it's not hot out. And I've had dysautonomia and POTS for about 35 years, plus some of the common comorbid conditions. And I think that what drives me is that it took me 17 years to get a diagnosis. And by that time, I had so many severe symptoms, and I had moved to Alaska, as Christy said, because staying shivering cold was the only way that I could keep from fainting all the time. So heat intolerance and dysautonomia really turned my life upside down. But thankfully now I'm a lot more functional for the most part. But those lost years made me really passionate about working to make things better for patients. So I've actually recently retired from being a nutritionist to spend full time on my volunteer work, which is getting research funded and published a little bit faster via the things that Christy mentioned at Standing Up to POTS and patients count and the POTS cast. So I want to start by acknowledging that dysautonomia can cause so many different nutrition challenges. Everything from having an appetite to meal planning, grocery shopping, cooking, cleaning, eating, swallowing, digesting, eliminating, and then the big one, trying to function while you're digesting. And I think that the patients already know this very well. And I'm really saying this for the sake of the friends and family members who might be watching and might not realize that dysautonomia can be mild or severe. It can present in a lot of different ways. And this is important because having supportive family and friends in this endeavor makes everything so much easier, less stressful, less contentious, less frustrating, less lonely. And I think that a lot of people maybe don't realize how challenging and how many different challenges can come with trying to get good nutrition when you have dysautonomia. So that's why I want to just mention this briefly. This is just a chart that shows the symptoms that are common in POTS, and it shows their prevalence in the parentheses afterwards. And so you can see that patients have numerous symptoms. They're not really set up to excel at any part of the nutrition process because between the fatigue, pain, concentration, memory difficulty, headache, lightheadedness with both sitting and even just standing, blurry vision, stomach ache, vomiting, bloating, and more, those symptoms could potentially bring challenges to any part, or in some cases, every part of the nutrition process. So I just say, please have compassion for patients or for yourself as a patient, because if this feels hard or complicated or frustrating, you're not imagining that, you're not alone, and you're not wrong. So, in fact, this is why the Great Potsy Baking Show never made it past the first episode. And I do feel like joking about this is the way to not cry about it. But seriously, the bottom line is that there's a lot of different challenges that can arise, that every patient is different because every patient has different combinations of symptoms and different types of dysautonomia, different underlying causes, triggers, severities, abilities. Here's a big one: different amounts of help from their loved ones. So the first practical tip is to take the mindset that you're going to have to figure out what works for you. There are no set protocols in this space. And I know we all just want to know what the heck to eat to feel better, but there's no one size fits all answer. Every patient has to do the work of finding their best routine. And we have some suggested places to start, but it's going to take some detective work, some trial and error, some keeping track of what helps and what hurts, and learning from every experience. So obviously a food and symptom journal can be helpful. Smartwatches or other devices like the Lumia device, which measures blood flow to the head, can help some patients do their detective work. Some people keep spreadsheets, others use apps or notebooks or paper, and there's no right or wrong way. It's just important to pay attention to the clues and try to use a methodical approach if you can. Um, this is probably obvious, but just need to say we recommend making any dietary changes gradually so that you don't shock your system. The low and slow method is kind of, again, what they recommend. And then we also have to remember that lots of invisible things can cause us to feel better or worse besides just food. Things like hormones, weather, mold exposure, stress, so many things. But food is often the most salient thing to blame. So sometimes we overblame the food, which can result in a needlessly narrow diet. So we kind of have to become a detective about all these things in order to figure out what part of it can be made better with diet. So the good news is that we are likely to find things that help a lot. A patient survey done by Dr. Jeffrey Boris and colleagues showed that over half of patients who tried dietary changes found something that reduced symptom severity by at least 50%. So hopefully that makes you feel optimistic that the work does pay off. And, we don't need to do this work alone. There's a lot of different types of help out there. So the number 2 practical tip is don't delay getting needed help. So you don't want to be like the patient in this cartoon who lets the pomegranate bully her because she can't stand up long enough to seed it or digest well enough to eat it. The pomegranate is, saying, move along, I'm way out of your league. That's how I felt at one point, but I feel it's important that we don't give up too easily, because depending on which part of eating is challenging for each one of us, there may be specialized help available. And remember that if you ask your primary care provider for help with these people, then they can oftentimes make referrals and get it paid for by insurance. And then we just want to remember that, like, the really good dietitians and occupational therapists and such, the ones who actually know about the triad or the septad, they sometimes have really long waits. So that's why I like to recommend that people get a relationship with one of them before you are in desperate need and you find out that, it's a 6-week wait to see somebody. Um, because what we're trying to avoid is the dreaded depletion spiral. And you can start at any step of the spiral, but it's no surprise that feeling worse can lead to eating worse, can lead to nutrient depletion, and it can become a vicious cycle if we're not careful. So we just want to try to have good help in place if you think there's a chance you might need it, before it becomes a vicious cycle. So, okay, let's get on to some aspects of dysautonomia that can be helped with practical nutrition strategies, such as the brain not getting adequate blood flow, especially when the patient is standing upright and especially when it's warm outside. So the brain is a really hungry organ. It wants lots of oxygen, nutrients, energy. So it really needs good circulation, and not getting enough can lead to all those symptoms of orthostatic intolerance: the dizziness, lightheadedness, syncope or presyncope, brain fog, visual disturbance. There's a lot of them. And sometimes, in addition to the brain not getting enough circulation, the heart isn't even getting enough blood return either. And so that can lead to tachycardia, palpitations, chest pain. And while there can be multiple reasons for poor blood return to the upper half of the body, especially when it's hot out, one thing that can usually help pretty quickly is consuming extra salt and fluids. And that's because it expands blood volume, which increases blood pressure and blood flow to the brain and the heart. Cold fluids can boost blood pressure even more by promoting vasoconstriction. Now, one common underlying factor in POTS and dysautonomia that robs the brain and the heart of adequate blood flow is hypovolemia, or the deficit in blood volume. And I found this interesting when I learned it, that the average adult has about 5 liters of blood, and about 70% of POTS patients, when studied, have been hypovolemic. And in a study, granted it was a small study of only 13 patients, the mean deficit in blood volume was about 12.5%, or a third of a liter of water. And when I heard that, I didn't think that sounded like that big of a deficit. Like, would I really miss a third of a liter? Um, but Dr. Raj and the colleagues wrote in their paper that that does represent a moderate to severe hypovolemia. And so having a third liter less blood in your system is enough to feel considerable symptoms. And the reason it's thought to happen is that the kidneys are flushing out too much salt. So here's my cartoon version of what happens. When the body starts getting low on blood volume, it sends a signal, or in this case, a memo, to the kidneys saying, hey, kidneys, blood volume is running low. Please remember the importance of recycling salt. In other words, put it back in the bloodstream. Don't pee it out. Fluids always follow the salt. So recycling the salt means keeping the fluids in the bloodstream. But in some POTS patients, the kidneys are mischievous and they file that memo in the trash along with the salt, meaning that it all gets peed out, making blood volume even lower. Then we add the hot weather, and the sweating only compounds this problem. And so the 2019 expert consensus statement recommended that POTS patients gradually increase their intake of salt and fluids, working towards at least 2 to 3 liters of water per day and 3 to 10 grams of salt per day. And some experts also recommend drinking half or about half the fluids from electrolyte drinks for better results. All fluids are hydrating except for alcohol. Front loading the drinks makes sense to minimize nighttime bathroom trips. And the sports nutrition literature suggests that actually chugging those first 2 cups can help promote a faster boost to blood volume. So a lot of patients like to do that before they even get out of bed in the morning. And the salt recommendation is, 3 to 10 grams per day from normal table salt. And your doctor or your dietitian can recommend a more exact amount for you. Some people shouldn't do the maximum, for example, if they have certain kidney or heart problems or high blood pressure. Some people might need even more in certain circumstances if they're, say, sweating a whole bunch or whatnot. And we do actually have some research showing that the high salt intake helps POTS patients reduce their standing heart rate and their norepinephrine, and that it helps reduce POTS symptoms, even though it only expanded their blood volume about halfway back to normal on average. So that is encouraging. But some dysautonomia patients may need more or less salt and fluids per day, depending on their particular diagnoses and symptoms. And I know that at first, when I had dysautonomia, I actually lost the ability to sweat, but other dysautonomia patients sweat excessively. So, hence this fantasy for a co op where we could get together and share so we all had the right amount. And this is just a reminder that eating extra salt does not mean that we're supposed to eat chips and pretzels for meals. You can just put salt on healthy foods because a balanced, healthy, varied diet is still important. Besides, at least if you're in Costco, the produce room is the place to cool off. I don't know if any of you have ever done this, lay down with your feet up in the produce room of Costco, but that is something I've done. um, For orthostatic hypotension, the experts report that rapidly drinking 2 cups of cold water can expand blood volume and raise the systolic blood pressure by over 20 points within just a few minutes and keep it there for about 2 hours. So that's something that you can do before you're going to have to have any sort of prolonged standing. God forbid it's your day to go to the DMV and wait in line. That might be a good idea to do that first. For patients with postprandial hypotension, in other words, blood pressure tanking after you eat, consuming 10 to 16 ounces of cold water about 15 minutes before meals can help. And some patients even like to do a little bit of caffeine with that if it's early enough in the day and won't keep them up at night. Let's see. So before we finish up hydration, you just want to use caution with alcohol. It can be a quadruple whammy for these reasons here. Diuretic means it flushes water out of your system. Vasodilator means it could make blood pooling worse. Depressant means that it might make your energy even worse. And then a mast cell trigger for people who have mast cell activation syndrome. Same thing with caffeine. You want to test your reaction to it. Some people absolutely love it for the energy and the blood pressure boost and the vasoconstriction, but others just get jitters, anxiety, or diarrhea. And so, on average, caffeine typically has about a 5-hour half-life, meaning that whatever time you drink it, there will be half as much caffeine left in your system after 5 hours, have half of that amount again in another 5 hours, and so on. And so that can sometimes help people figure out what time they should cut off their caffeine for the day. I hear from a lot of patients that they have an exact amount of caffeine that makes them feel good, and any bit more is bad, any bit less is bad. And so they're the kinds of people who bring their own coffee when they travel or whatnot because they don't want to risk getting the wrong amount. And then this is just a case study where POTS was actually caused by Red Bull energy drink in this case, and the POTS went away when the patient stopped drinking it. So that covers the hydration to boost blood volume. And I know most people probably are pretty aware of that stuff, but it all has to be said. But let's move on to the next most common problem in dysautonomia that can be exacerbated by heat, and that is symptoms worsening after meals, especially larger meals. And a lot of patients say they feel drugged after eating, or they feel extra fatigue or dizziness, tachycardia, brain fog, weakness. Sometimes people talk about sleep attacks, bloating, and those who are prone to fainting may have a real danger zone after a large meal. And there are several reasons that this can be a problem. Um, the first is that it's known that a regular sized meal raises heart rate and sends about 30% of circulating blood to the GI tract to promote digestion, because digestion is a big job. It takes a lot of blood. But this means that blood is now not going back to your heart and your head as often. And then, second, when your blood sugar goes up from eating carbohydrates, then insulin gets released. And if insulin gets too high, that is known to cause fatigue, and incidentally, also inflammation. So, what can we do? Well, there's always compression stockings and abdominal binders to help prevent blood pooling, but those can be tough in summer. Um, we can also just eat smaller, more frequent meals. And some experts recommend 5 or 6 mini meals. Other people just like to graze all day. Again, there's no set protocol, but this makes a huge difference for some patients, like the one who told me that it made her able to play pickleball again just from doing this one thing. And many patients tell me that the key to their entire day is to shower first and then eat breakfast. If they do it the other way around, then they feel worse all day long. And so, especially in the summertime, um, this can be something that, once the blood pools, it's hard to get it to stop pooling until you have a night of laying down with your feet up. And so if you can kind of do anything you can to prevent it, any major blood pooling in the first place, it might be helpful. Another thing that can help is limiting intake of foods that are high glycemic or high carb, especially processed carbs with no fiber like sweets, soda, and white bread. And this can help by stabilizing blood sugar, reducing that excess insulin we talked about, and reducing blood pooling. It turns out that our beloved carbohydrates actually trigger more vasodilation and more blood pooling than proteins and fats do. And incidentally, shortness of breath, for anybody who struggles with shortness of breath, carbohydrates can trigger that also more than proteins and fats. So, one possible experiment is to just gradually start eating more proteins and healthy fats, fewer carbs, and see if that takes you in the right direction. Again, there is no set protocol, there is no recommendation to completely avoid carbs. And in fact, that can raise stress hormones and maybe have a cost to the microbiome. So, we're not recommending anything super extreme here, just that you might want to play with your ratios gently and see what makes you feel good. But we do have some actual dysautonomia research to look at here. So this is coming from Dr. Cindy Chabau's lab at Vanderbilt, and it found that POTS patients were more prone to glucose intolerance. So let's explain what that is. A normal body, after ingesting carbohydrates, will release the hormone insulin to escort the blood sugar, also known as glucose, into the muscle cells where it can be either burned or stored. And insulin resistance is when cells don't respond to the insulin and don't let in the glucose. So it just floats around in the bloodstream. The pancreas then puts out extra insulin to try to overcome the resistance. But over time, if this progresses, if it gets worse, then the blood sugar just may not be able to enter the cells. It might drive up blood sugar, which is not healthy. And at some point, the progression can lead to type 2 diabetes. So when Dr. Chabau's lab at Vanderbilt did a glucose challenge in POTS patients, she found that their insulin was twice as high as controls who were matched for age, gender, and size. So that's another reason to reduce high glycemic carbs that can spike your blood sugar, like those sweets. And if this feels unfair, my husband actually made us this cartoon as a sympathy joke. And it quotes the study finding that, quote, despite normal body mass index, POTS patients have impaired glucose tolerance, which dramatically increases their risk to develop type 2 diabetes mellitus, unquote. And, there's this snarky banner, taking joys from your life, rolling them up in a carpet and throwing them off a bridge since 1993. That's when POTS got named. So it's a little dramatic, but I share it because I don't know, it cheered me up when I learned this because I felt like this was very unfair. Um, Now, incidentally, full-blown type 2 diabetes after about 10 or 15 years granted is the number one cause of autonomic neuropathy, right? So that's like the last thing you need if you already have dysautonomia. Um, but if we're going to look on the bright side, giving up sugar has tons of other benefits at least. And if you do have glucose intolerance that progresses to needing medical attention, at least it is super common, super mainstream, taught in every medical school. So at least it won't be like dysautonomia or EDS or MCAS, where you need to see 20 doctors to find one who knows how to help you. So I always say that it's amazing what counts as a victory in our space, and this is maybe one of those. Um, okay, but moving on, the next practical tip to consider is maybe taking a break from gluten. Um, it would take about a month at least, although it can take up to 4 months to see the full benefit. But gluten is found in wheat, rye, barley, and then processed foods that are made from those ingredients. And the reason is that POTS patients appear to have higher levels of allergy and intolerance to gluten. One study found that 4% of POTS patients had confirmed celiac disease, which was 4 times the background rate. And when it came to self-reported gluten sensitivity, 42% of POTS patients had it versus only 19% among age and sex matched controls. So the authors said that they had done that study because their POTS patients kept telling them how much better they felt when they were gluten free. And at the dysautonomia clinic, we were hearing the exact same thing. So we also did a survey of 20 patients who had on their own already decided to go gluten free, just to find out which symptoms had gotten better for them. And 19 out of 20 patients reported that their dysautonomia symptoms had gotten better going gluten free. Um, some experts also recommend doing elimination trials of dairy or other potential triggers. And this is an area where, if you're going to restrict food groups, you might consider engaging the help of a dietitian so that you make sure to stay nourished. Also, we need to remember that anytime we're doing food restriction, that is a risk factor for setting off disordered eating in vulnerable people. So that's why you'll see some people who are very in favor of elimination diets in this space and others who are very cautious. Again, I think it's about whatever is right for you, and consider getting professional help if you want to make sure that you do it the best possible way. So, the next practical tip is to identify and correct any nutrient imbalances for the obvious reason that nobody ever felt better with a deficiency, and that it plays a part in that dreaded deficiency spiral. Getting tested is probably a good idea. Dr. Svetlana Blichstein at the Dysautonomia Clinic generously helped us at Standing Up to POTS create a web page where she shared the nutrient tests that she recommends. So those are listed here, and I'll just leave this here a moment in case anybody wants to take a screenshot and go to that website. Um, there may be other reasons to test for other things as well, but these are the ones that she tests in all of her dysautonomia patients. And okay, just a couple left. Number 8, plan for flares. And maybe that seems obvious, but having a tailored solution ready for each different kind of challenge that you're likely to encounter is a good idea. So you might think about the types of flares you have, where you tend to get them, and try to anticipate where you might be, what you might need, and see if you can stash those, what you're going to need in the right places. This is another good use of a dietitian. They can help you create these plans, tailored to your unique challenges. Um, let's see. Oh, yeah, a lot of emergencies might be preventable with some forethought, um, and especially when it's hot out. Um, you know, I like to joke that Sesame Street can turn into Syncope Street on a hot day if you aren't prepared with drinks and snacks and salt and maybe a way to cool off. And so, my suggestion is to just, maybe hit pause, take 5 minutes right now, and think about what emergency snacks you would put, where if you are prone to, any sort of dangerous kind of flare. So these are just some food ideas that meet the criteria that we discussed. Um, they're not the only ideas, they're just ones that are pretty quick, gluten free, low carb. Um, I'll give you a minute in case you want to just look it over. I don't know too many dysautonomia patients who are up for cooking a real recipe from scratch at night that often. So, obviously, batch cooking is one of the suggestions that comes up often. I think there's a lot of great frozen meals out there these days. I'm a fan of setting aside 20 minutes sometime when you have okay energy to just browse your local frozen meal section and find the ones that look worth trying. I think a lot of them are pretty healthy and pretty quick and appetizing these days. Can't forget your cold snacks. Homemade frozen popsicles are pretty quick to make. You can obviously put anything you want in them. Um, and so I like to call those potsicles. And I'm just going to wrap it up. So this is just a summary, the practical tips that we talked about. And that's all. So yeah, I look forward to hearing what you guys like to do better to survive all summer. And that's it. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Jill. I know somebody is asking for you to go back to the nutrition testing slide. So if you can do that, and then we can take any questions if anybody wants to come on camera, go off mute, or put it in the chat and we can facilitate any questions or share. It would be great if those of you could go off camera and show us your faces and, have a moment where we could have a little bit of community and take the opportunity to connect, as this disorder is often pretty hard to deal with. And, getting to understand that there are other people out there like you is important. So if you will, take a moment to go off camera and join us here, show your face. There's never going to be any judgment in this environment. Yeah, thank you guys. Thank you. Thank you, Joanna and Diana and Katie. Anybody else who wants to join the discussion? Thanks for going back to the slide. And Jill, I'm sure that you'll be able to share these slides so that I can publish them after the fact with the recording. So if you didn't get a chance to like screenshot all the fantastic info or the great cartoons,
They were
which
amazing.
they are so amazing. They're
Thank
so amazing. Um, and your cartoons are featured on the website that you and your husband do at Doodle Through. It's THRU.com. If you didn't catch that on some of those. So she's got some really good ones there. Um, Anybody have any specific questions or anything they wanted to ask of Jill?
Yeah, I have one. Hi, Jill. Thanks for the informative PowerPoint. I am just getting to understand how much more POTS plays a part in the complexity of the conditions that not only I have, but I share with my son. And I have a question regarding these flares and what they look like. My son just turned 13. So we're going through a rapid growth phase right now. I think just started. He's already tall, but now it's taller. And he's got Ehlers-Danlos and mast cell immune issues. But lately, in the last 2 weeks, he's maybe gone out to play outside for 10 to 15 minutes and then comes in and just crashes. And he gets nauseous, he'll get reflux. The fatigue is overwhelming, which I've felt that part myself before. And then it seems to kind of last into the next few days. Um, why I don't know if you could tell this, but is that normal as you're going through puberty that the heat intolerance gets worse? It's the only because he used to be somewhat tolerant of the heat.
Do me a favor.
So I guess everything that you're describing to me, I'm not a practitioner, and we could ask Katie here too, but it sounds like classic what I
Yeah.
hear about. Yes. I wonder if, growth spurt just means that now he's got, his brain is that much higher, and his poor heart
Oh,
has to work that much harder against gravity to get enough
okay.
circulation up to his brain. He may need to drink even more than in the past. Um, and so, I would kind of defer to Katie here to talk about things, beyond that. I'd feel like I was overstepping, but I can tell you that,
Okay.
yeah, I hear that story all the time.
Okay. Well, that's
Yeah,
good.
yeah, I
That
agree. I
clears
think
a
like
lot.
the growth spurt slash like blood volume and like increasing as you age too. Like as kids are growth spurt, he's probably getting like blood volume growth spurt too, thinking about it that way.
I've
Okay.
actually wondered. I'm very short. I'm only 5 feet tall, and I've
Ugh.
actually wondered, am I lucky? Would it be so much worse? And like, I among fainters, do fainters tend to be taller because they have to work that much harder against gravity? I don't know, but it kind of seems logical to me.
Hmm.
Yeah, he just doesn't even want to go outside now unless we're in the pool or a lake, which makes
I mean,
sense.
I don't blame him.
Yeah, it just
Yeah,
seems to have gotten worse. And I'm like, oh
Frog
no.
togs. Those
you
frog
Yeah.
know
togs,
what?
the ones that are wet, that go around the neck.
I did buy one of the like this thing that you could put in the fridge and go around the neck, but I don't have it in the fridge, so it's not really helpful. Yes. So, okay.
Yeah,
Thank you.
I was
the
gonna say,
cloth that Katie's talking about is called a frog tog, or like it's one of those moist things that you get it wet and you kind of wring it and then snap it and it cools off, and being able to like put that on your neck or on his head.
I
Um,
need to get some.
yeah, those are
yeah,
helpful.
before I moved to Alaska, I tried every cooling vest on the market and decided that just a wet towel around my neck was better than anything. Um, and and carrying around a spray bottle to just spray myself, it wasn't very hip, but um,
Well, he's talking of moving to Alaska at this point.
You can also just use a cotton scarf. That's what I've been doing all summer. And then anytime I'm near a water fountain or a sink, I just get it wet again, and it's great.
Okay.
one other thing that people recommend sometimes is, even when you're not necessarily drinking, hold a cold drink, or maybe even like freeze a water bottle. And
Yeah.
because when your hands are icy cold, that does help cool the rest of your body.
And these flares can last. Have people seen that? Where it's more than one day.
Like I
Okay.
know with mine, like if it's a bad day and I go out for the morning walk with my dog and it hits me for whatever reason I can't figure out, I think low pressure makes me worse. Um or like when there's a pressure system change, but like it can take me out for the day. It's like, well, there goes my whole day.
That's what the pressure changes do to me as well.
Hmm. I use an app that's called WeatherX, and it's basically just a notification of, pressure changes are coming, and it tells you like what direction and at what measurement. And
Okay.
I've been able to figure out, okay, like at this number and above or below or whatever is when it hits me hard. And so on those days when I get up and go, oh God, I feel terrible. Like, why
Mm.
do I feel terrible? What did I do? I can look at the app and go, oh, something's coming. That's why I feel terrible. Just the validation helps.
That was Sunday here if you're in Austin.
Hmm.
I looked down to the southwest or southeast and I was like, oh, they're the black clouds.
Yeah, I was almost bedbound all day in Austin.
Yeah.
Yeah. But Saturday was amazing. Yeah.
Yeah. Today was better.
I have a remedial question that might have been in the presentation, but I didn't catch it. How does one test for one's overall blood volume?
Oh, I'm afraid that I don't know of any, commercially available or way to do it. And I don't think it's something offered in clinics. And in a
Yeah.
research setting, they've been able to do it.
Okay.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah, but I think you bring up a good point, which is that when they find that 70% of the POTS patients had low blood volume, that means that 30% didn't. And so, there's a chance that for that other 30%, maybe they would still benefit from boosting blood volume with salt and fluid, but they don't think there's any guarantee.
I know with me, this is a 50-ounce like hydro flask, and I drink like 4 or 5 of them a day. And I know that sounds like ridiculous overkill, but if I don't have like 100 to 150 ounces a day, I just feel terrible. And a lot of that has to have some form of electrolyte. I mean, I go for the milder ones. I actually have an electrolyte spreadsheet. If you give me a minute, I'll put it in the chat of like all the
You do.
different brands with the ingredients and which ones are higher in sodium, which ones are sugar.
Well, that's great. I'm
Yeah. Jill,
glad that you ran out there.
do you have any like wisdom on, electrolytes or
I think everybody has their favorites. I'll tell you that on the Potscast, every time we interview a patient, one of the questions we ask is, "What's your favorite way to hydrate?" And I swear 90% of patients say liquid IV, and so that is a popular one. There's a few people who like the kind, like they need sugar in there to feel like they're really absorbing it. Other people, of course, sugar, like we talked about, may increase blood pooling, but there are a few people out there that feel like having a little bit of sugar in their water, it does make you hydrate faster. It does make you hydrate more. It comes at the cost of the sugar and possibly the blood pooling, but for some people, that is really good for them. So I'm sorry,
I had
like everything else
somewhere-
in this space, it's like everybody's so different.
I thought I had read somewhere that the sugar helps you absorb the electrolytes better. Is that accurate or yes?
Yeah, yeah.
No?
So like for example, like in the World Health Organization, like the oral rehydration,
Right.
what they would give somebody who was in dire need of hydration, there absolutely would be
A little
sugar
bit.
in
Okay.
there.
Gotcha.
And if it's less urgent,
You
then
don't necessarily
maybe
need
it
it because
matters less,
yeah.
but it still does, yeah, boost hydration.
Yeah, pickle juice shots is like my favorite. That was how I first figured out that like, oh, then I don't get like a hangover headache the next day after doing a bike ride. Oh, this is amazing.
so the study that you talked about from Vanderbilt about the insulin resistance and glucose related issues with POTS was pretty fascinating to me personally. Um, because I've bounced in and out of, whether they're, insulin resistance and things like that. So I think that's an area that people will probably be talking about and looking at as, you know,
Yeah, so if we have a minute to talk about that for a minute, I'm very interested in that. Um, but I wonder how much of that is due to the, pure dysautonomia and dysregulation of the autonomics, and how much of that is other things that come with a chronic illness that are also known to be bad for blood sugar, like stress,
Stress.
like not getting good sleep, like tending to eat late. And I know a lot of POTS patients, they are very nauseous for the first half of the day. They can't even really eat anything till later. So they do end up eating a lot more at night, and that's known to cause a bigger insulin release than eating early in the day. Now, I guess the fact that in the study they did it in a controlled setting, it was an actual glucose test where they gave everybody, I think it was 75 grams of glucose to drink, and they measured their insulin for the next 2 hours. That, you know, that's not taking into, or that wouldn't be accounted for by people's different circadian rhythms. But all those things that kind of come with chronic illness are also kind of not great. So you could theoretically improve your glucose tolerance not only by reducing carbohydrate intake, but for example, if you did magically find some way to improve your sleep or reduce your stress, build muscle is another thing that does it. Theoretically, those all might help.
It's the inflammation too, because my son, again, he's pre-diabetic just barely, and he's tall and thin and active when he can be, and there's no reason for it. And one thought of mine was the electrolytes burn his throat, so he likes the milder ones too. And we Gatorade, but that's a lot of sugar. So finding something there, but I think for him, he's had such a hard year, the inflammation has been a big part of that.
If he likes Gatorade, try the G0.
The
That's
G zero.
That's the
Okay.
no sugar version. And then somebody's put here in the chat, the electrolyte that I like the best, that has like the kind of lowest sugar and the right balance for me, that, like Liquid IV seems to be like really intense. And, like you said, burns the throat, is the one called Ultima.
Yes.
You can get that on Amazon.
And Whole Foods has that one, and then Cure also is next to Ultima, is a good one.
Yeah, but it's all of these things are like fine tuning a piano and for your body. It's like trying to find the exact little thing of, tweak this to kind of get the right sound, to try to create a symphony of just being well. And it's hard because not everybody's body is the same. But well, Jill, before we wrap up, I don't know if we have any more questions, but do you have what's kind of your best advice for people that might be feeling, discouraged or overwhelmed, kind of managing all these things? Like, how are you so smiley and creating all these fantastical cartoons and doing this great purposeful work, right?
You are very kind. Thank you. But yes, a lot of it is driven by frustration and sleepless nights, right? Like many of us. um, but I guess I, I I'm a firm believer that, basically everybody, no matter what they have going on in life, sort of like trial and error, finding what works best for you, whether it's about nutrition or your relationship or your sleep or anything in life, trial and error, figure out what works for you, and then cement that to a routine. Whatever works for you, get it into a routine with, you can cement routines faster by using consistency, doing the same thing in the same way at the same time each week, at the same place each week. And at least that is what has seemed to serve me and a lot of my clients throughout the years. um, Largely because once you make a routine, not only does it get those good helpful behaviors on autopilot, but it takes the emotion out of it, because
Yeah.
nothing is worse than like using willpower every single day to get yourself to do this or do that. And oh, hi. And so that has been a little bit of my strategy. I know everybody's got different things that work for them, but I think there's no way to do this without the trial and error. Trial and error stinks. It's not fun, but I don't think there's any way to get around it. And so just trying to remember that when things fail, it's a good lesson, and at least you learn something every day, and that's the best you can hope for. And I think that things like you're doing, Christy, making places where we can come together and, you know, talk or commiserate or whatnot is so huge. So thank you.
Yeah, it's being able to commiserate and celebrate, all the things that we learn along the way and we want to share, and whether it's on podcasts or in books or in support groups, and making new friends and having connections of, getting through this um wacky world of sometimes feeling like you have to get a DIY doctorate to get through this, because there's not a lot of providers out there who can help you through this. And, Katie Volkers, who is on here from A to Zebra Health, is, instrumental in kind of treating the EDS POTS mast cell community with her health practice. But she is a very rare unicorn, right? I mean, they're not out there. So, I know I'm personally grateful, for her being able to help, and I just want to like shout it from the rooftops and clone her, because they're just too few and far between. Oh, I thought you were gone, and I was
I was
talking about
about to
you.
be, and then I was like, oh, thank you.
Take that love, right?
I
Yeah,
appreciate
good.
it.
Yeah.
Right.
I
Well, I'll
always
see
feel
you
like
guys
these turn
later.
into a love fest, because I'm just really grateful for everybody that, all the things that they do. And thank you, Jill, for spending your time and your energy to do this presentation and spend time with us. Thank you all for joining us. And I hope that everyone, learned something, gained something valuable that you can take away to yourself and those people that you care about. And we'll be sharing the recording and funny cartoons after. So everybody go and have a great rest of their Tuesday, now that it's cooled off a little bit into the evening. Just a little bit. It's, maybe down to 90 here where we are. So again, thank you, Jill. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, Jill.
Appreciate your
Thanks,
time.
everyone.
You too.
All right.
Appreciate it. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.